Behind an Amish farmhouse in Lancaster County, there's usually a wooden door set into the ground. Down the steps, in the dark, sit stoneware crocks the size of barrels, and some of the vegetables inside them were packed away 3 winters ago. Nothing in that cellar was canned, frozen, or sealed under pressure. The vegetables were simply layered into salt brine and left alone, which is a method families in these communities have trusted since long before the first glass jar was ever invented. It's called lacto-fermentation, and it works because of bacteria that already live on every vegetable you grow. Give those bacteria salt and keep the air away, and they turn natural sugars into lactic acid, an acid strong enough that spoilage organisms cannot survive in it. The whole craft comes down to one rule older than refrigeration: keep everything under the brine. A vegetable below the liquid is protected, while a vegetable poking above it will mold, which is why Amish crocks hold a weighted stone or plate, pressing the harvest down into its own juices. Stoneware matters more than people think. A thick-walled crock holds a steady, cool temperature, the way a glass jar never will, and it blocks light completely. So fermentation moves slowly and evenly through 20 gallons of vegetables, instead of racing ahead in one warm spot. Then the cellar finishes the job. At 50 degrees or colder, an active ferment slows to a crawl, and food that would soften in 3 months on a kitchen counter holds its crunch through one winter, then another. Cold storage, not the jar, is what buys the years. Compare that with modern canning, where everything gets boiled until it's sterile. Heat kills the bad organisms, true, but it also kills the good ones, breaks down vitamins, and leaves you dependent on perfect seals. A crock keeps its food alive, acidic, and quietly defending itself. Old order families plan in seasons, not weeks. A crock packed in October feeds the household until spring, gets topped with the next harvest, and the brine grows stronger with each cycle. Kept cold and kept submerged, kraut and brined roots have stayed edible for 3 years and beyond. University extension offices teach the same chemistry today, from Minnesota to Maine: salt, vegetable, thyme, and naturally occurring bacteria. The Amish never needed the lab work, though. They watched their grandmothers do it, and their grandmothers watched theirs back across the Atlantic to the old country. You don't need much to copy them. A crock or a food-safe bucket, coarse salt without iodine, a plate that fits inside, and something heavy to weigh it down will ferment anything on this list. The vegetables and the cellar do the rest of the work. 25 vegetables fill these cellars year after year, some you'd expect, others that rarely get fermented outside these communities. We'll count them down from 25, starting with the odd ones and ending with the single crock no Amish kitchen would face winter without. Number 25. Asparagus. Those spring spears show up weeks before anything else in the garden, so families brine the surplus whole, standing upright in the crock-like fence posts. After a month, they're tangy and snappy, and they carry the taste of April into deep December. 24 is okra, and yes, the slime question has an answer. Fermented whole with the stems left on, okra stays firm instead of slippery, because cutting it open is what releases the gel. A few hot peppers in the brine make it a southern table favorite. Brussels sprouts take the 23rd spot. Halved so the brine can reach their centers, they ferment into something far milder than the boiled version most people grew up dreading. The dense little heads hold their texture longer in the crock than nearly any other brassica. Number 22. Celery. It seems too watery to keep, yet that water is exactly why it works. Celery makes its own brine almost instantly under salt. Old recipes chop it with cabbage for a kraut that seasons soups all winter, stalk, leaf and all. Zucchini and summer squash land at 21. Every gardener knows the august avalanche, when the plants outrun the family's appetite. Sliced thick and brined with dill and garlic, squash turns into a pickle firm enough to survive months in the cellar instead of days on the counter. 20 is winter squash, cubed and packed in brine, one of the stranger entries until you taste it. The flesh turns tart and almost fruity, useful anywhere a vinegar pickle might otherwise go, and the seeds get roasted, because nothing leaves an Amish kitchen wasted. Green tomatoes hold the 19th spot, and they solve a problem every northern gardener faces, frost arriving while half the crop is still hard and unripe. Brined with garlic and dill, they become a sour, meaty pickle that old-timers often prized above the cucumber kind. Number 18 is corn, cut from the cob and fermented into what Pennsylvania Dutch tables knew as sour corn. The kernels keep their sweetness underneath the tang, which makes them a relish for beans and cornbread and a way to hold summer's biggest crop without a single jar. 17. Sweet bell peppers. Cut into strips, they ferment fast and stay bright red and orange in the crock through the grey months, a kind of visual medicine in February. Their walls stay crisp, and the brine they leave behind is good enough to drink. Hot peppers come in at 16. Mashed with salt and left to work for months, they turn into the same style of aged pepper sauce that built famous Louisiana brands, made at home for pennies. Whole fermented jalapenos also keep their fire long after fresh ones would rot. 15 is the leafy kraut, mustard greens, collards, and turnip tops. Most people compost them. Fermenting families salt them down the way much of Asia salts its greens, ending up with a sour, dark leaf that cooks into beans and broth like a seasoning all its own. Number 14. Kohlrabi, the odd green Sputnik of the garden. Peeled and shredded, it ferments into a kraut crunchier than cabbage and a little sweeter. And the bulbs store so well that a fall crop can wait weeks in the cellar before it even meets the crock. Parsnips take 13. Frost turns their starch to sugar, which gives the bacteria more to eat, and the brine a gentle sweetness. Shredded with carrots or brined in chunks, they hold up beautifully in cold storage. These were winter staples centuries before the supermarket existed. 12 is rutabaga, the crop that kept whole stretches of northern Europe alive through famine winters. Cubed or shredded into kraut, it stays dense and keeps for ages, and its slightly bitter edge mellows in the brine into something closer to a mild turnip cheese tang. Cauliflower lands at 11. Broken into florets and brined with a few carrot slices and dill heads, it makes the backbone of the mixed crock pickles you'll see at Amish market stands. The florets stay firm for many months, soaking up whatever spice shares the vessel. Number 10. onions. Most hang in the cellar dry, but the small ones, the doubles and the thick-necked bulbs that won't cure, get sliced into the crock instead. Fermented onion loses its harsh bite, keeps its crunch, and seasons a plate of plain potatoes like a condiment. Garlic holds the 9th spot. Whole peeled cloves sit in brine for months, slowly turning mild and almost buttery, and the leftover liquid becomes a seasoning stronger than the cloves themselves. A single crock of it covers a family's cooking from one harvest to the next. 8 is the radish family, from spring reds to the great white winter daikon. Radishes ferment quickly and trade their hot bite for sourness within a week, while the big storage types, sliced into rounds, stay crisp under brine clear through to planting season. Number 7. Napa cabbage, the loose-leafed cousin that ferments faster than regular heads. Salted and packed with ginger, garlic and pepper flakes, it leans toward kimchi. Salted plain, it makes a softer, quicker kraut. Either way, it bridges the gap while the big October crocks mature. Green beans take 6. Brined whole with dill and garlic, they become the dilly beans that show up at every Amish farm stand, snappy and sour. Fermenting also handles what canning makes difficult. Since beans are low acid and risky in a water bath, the brine solves that on its own. 5. Cucumbers, the original crock pickle. Before grocery shelves, the barrel of salt-brined cukes was how most of the world ate them, and the half-sour deli pickle is a direct descendant. A grape or oak leaf in the brine, rich in tannin, keeps them from going soft. Beets hold the 4th spot, and they give you 2 foods in one vessel. The roots themselves turn sweet, sour, and earthy, while the deep red brine becomes beet kvass, a drink Eastern European and plain communities alike have sipped as a tonic for generations. Number 3. Carrots. Shredded into kraut, brined as sticks for children, or fermented whole, they may be the most forgiving vegetable in the entire crock. Their sugar feeds a fast, reliable ferment, and in a cold cellar they hold their snap longer than almost anything else. 2 is the turnip, and it carries its own tradition. Sauerruben, shredded turnip kraut, sits beside sauerkraut in the oldest Pennsylvania Dutch cookbooks. It ferments into something milder and juicier than cabbage, and a heavy fall crop of turnips costs almost nothing to grow. And number 1 was never in doubt. Cabbage, sauerkraut, is the anchor of the whole system. The crop pioneers could count on when everything else failed. 20 heads, a pound of salt, 1 stone crock, and a family had vitamin C and vegetables until the ground thawed. Set those 25 side by side, and a pattern emerges. Nearly everyone is cheap, heavy-yielding, and at its best in cold weather, which is the whole design. The crock wasn't built around delicate produce. The garden was planted around what the crock keeps. There's a reason sailors carried kraut barrels across oceans. Captain Cook stocked his ships with sauerkraut to hold off scurvy. The same acid that protects the vegetable protects the vitamins inside it, where canning heat would have boiled much of that nutrition away. It also explains something about Amish health and Amish grocery bills. A household that ferments a season's surplus buys almost no pickles, condiments, or winter vegetables, and every serving arrives carrying live cultures that a pasteurized jar from the store simply doesn't have. None of this demands a farm. A 5-gallon bucket in an apartment closet, a head of cabbage, and 2 tablespoons of salt will teach you the entire craft in 3 weeks. The skill scales up from there, one crock at a time, the way it always has. The deeper lesson sits in the timeline. Canning gives you food that's safe but inert, waiting in suspended animation. Fermentation gives you food that's still alive, still changing, growing more sour and more protective the longer it sits. One method pauses the harvest, the other one finishes it. Long after the power grid existed, those cellar doors stayed shut against it, and not out of stubbornness. The families beneath them had already solved winter with salt, stone, and patience, and a solution that has worked for 300 years doesn't need a plug to prove itself.